What's up, everybody? Cody Shirk here, and I've got some interesting news and information for gold, silver, and rare earth metal investors. I am currently in, where am I? National Harbor, Maryland, and across the river here is DC. Last night I was in DC speaking to a small group of investors, and this morning I was speaking to a much larger group of investors about investing outside of the US, taking their money from the US and investing in companies that are operating outside of the US in international markets that are looking attractive right now, because the reality is the US is very expensive and there are some cheap companies operating outside of the US that look very attractive right now. There has been some news coming out of the US State Department over the past several weeks that coincides with the topic of investing in international markets that I think is specifically interesting. And that news is that the US is currently in South America establishing new relationships with Peru, Chile, Argentina, and Ecuador for them to supply strategic metals to the US. So specifically these MOUs, memorandums of understanding, state that these countries agree to supply the US with these strategic metals so the US can continue to manufacture high-end electronics, weapons, and other high-end products using rare earth metals. Historically, the US has gotten access to many of these metals on the open market, which happen to run through or come from China, Russia, or Africa. And in Africa, as I've mentioned in other videos, the US has been losing control or losing access to metals that are mined in the Sahel region. The Wagner Group out of Russia, the mercenaries out of Russia, have been overthrowing governments in this region of Africa, Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso specifically. And this area contains a lot of gold and rare earth metals as well as uranium. And the Wagner Group has also taken over mines which were owned by publicly traded companies. So investors who are or were invested in these companies got the short end of the stick. And if you're still invested in a company that's operating in Africa right now, you should seriously consider getting out of it, because the risk is only increasing as time goes on. For investors who understand that there are a lot of resources in Latin America, specifically South America, it might be a good time to reallocate to this region to look at companies that are operating specifically in Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and Argentina. The US is stating, they just stated last week, that Chile, Ecuador, Peru, and Argentina are part of this group of countries that the US is going to work with to get these strategic metals from those countries to supply US manufacturers. The bigger picture here is for investors to understand that the world is realigning itself. It's getting access to, the US is getting access to new markets through different channels. They're trying to avoid certain players, and the opposite is happening with these other countries. So trade routes that have traditionally been in play for decades are completely changing, and investors who are not paying attention, they're not reallocating, or they're not readjusting to where their interests are, could get caught in a bad situation. And many investors already have, specifically with the gold mining and uranium mining companies in Africa, with the Wagner Group just taking over the mines. So I'm gonna keep an eye on this whole situation and keep you updated on this, but I would say right now, if you're holding any gold, silver miners, or rare earth metals miners that are operating in any area where the US is not in a good relationship with, if you're a US investor, you should seriously consider reallocating to companies that are operating in favorable districts. I'm gonna head into DC tonight, AKA the swamp, so wish me luck. All right, see ya.